So in any CAD software, traditionally, to create a three-dimensional object, first you need to create a 2D shape, and then we can manipulate that shape to become a 3D object. Now, in Fusion, to create a two-dimensional shape, we're going to use a sketch tool. So that should be up in your Create set of tools here. If it's not, it should be on this list there now. If it's not, it's something you use constantly. So just pin it to the toolbar. If you click on the three little dots there, you can pin it there. We use it all the time, so it should be up in this Create set. Now, when I click that, it can't read my mind in terms of which surface I want to draw on. So I've got options here, and this is sort of the default set of planes which are in this 3D model. And the point where they'll meet is what's called our origin, and that's the center of the 3D universe that we're working in. And we always want to start our model at that center point. So I can see over here my view cube. This would be the front of my model, this would be the top of my model, and this would be the side, or the right-hand side of my model. Now, I'm going to choose to sketch on one of these surfaces, and I can sketch on any flat surface in my model. So these are my options at the moment because there's nothing in the model. So I'm going to just draw on the top plane to start with. And when it spins around, it looks directly down on top of what I'm drawing, and I'll automatically have a new set of sketch tools which pop up the top here. And again, there's a whole list of other tools or other ways I can draw shapes just under this drop down, and the same deal with modifying. I'll talk about these constraints a bit later on. You'll also have a sketch palette which pops up over here for different ways of viewing and manipulating your sketch. Almost all the time I want to start my sketch from that origin point there. See, when I hover over it, it sort of gives me a point which I can select. So I'm going to start creating my shapes. I'm just going to start off with a rectangle tool, basic 2-point rectangle. I'm going to hover over that starting point. I'll click once, and it's unlikely that I'll ever need to create things which are just randomly sized, but there are scenarios. But in this case, we can enter in values for how big we want this rectangle to be. So I might need this to be 100 millimeters. So millimeters is the default unit of measurement in this software. You can change it, but there's no need to. So I can then use the tab key to move across to the other side, and I can enter a value for this size. So I might go 200 on this one. And when I hit enter, it will create the rectangle that size. Now, every now and then, I might accidentally or intentionally drop in a random sized shape, and it comes in and it's all blue like this. When it's all blue, that means it's not locked in place, so it can still move around. I can drag these sides and make it bigger or smaller, or I can move the entire thing around. When the lines are all black like this, it's locked in place, and it's what's called fully defined. It means that it's not going to move on me, which is a good practice to have all your sketches fully defined. So if I do create something which is not defined, I can apply sketch dimensions and choose the surfaces that I want to dimension. So I might make this one 200 and this one 100. So you notice this is still blue because the whole thing can still move around. So when I started this one on the origin point, it knows that it's locked to that point there. So this one, while it's 100 by 200, and I can't stretch it and make it bigger or smaller now, it won't be fully defined until I tell it how far away from the origin it is. Until it's fully defined. Now there's scenarios where we don't want to fully define things, but in this case, I'll just drop these in. Okay, so there's more than just rectangles you can create. As I said, there's a whole bunch of other tools in here we can use to create different shapes and forms. So ellipse will create sort of an oval shape. Create circle shapes. We can create arcs, and there's a few different ways you can create these arcs. The most common one we'll use will be something called a 3-point arc. So I'm going to choose where the curve starts and where it finishes, and how big a curve we want that to be. And more organic sorts of shapes like splines we can create. Like this. Heaps of different tools you can use. And there's also a set of modify tools. So these modify tools can be things like fillets. So if I wanted to round off this edge, there's also things like trim, where I can get rid of surfaces I don't need, or lines I don't need anymore, rather. So I'll trim out some of those. And things like offset. So I can offset this line so it's bigger or smaller, depending on my needs. Now, every time I use one of these tools, it will give me a value, so I can enter in a dimension. I can always come back and change those. Right, so these ones aren't fully defined, but that's fine for this demonstration. Once I finish drawing the things that I want to make three-dimensional, I'm going to finish my sketch. So you can finish it over here, or you can finish it up here. Now, at this point, looking at the top view, if I spin around and look at this from the front view, these things are perfectly flat. They have no thickness to them at all. So, as I said before, it's just a two-dimensional sketch floating in space at this point in time. Now, to turn it into a 3D thing, the most common thing that we use is called an extrude. And this is where I can grab one of the shapes I've created. I can select that shape, and I can drag it up and turn it into a 3D shape. Again, I can choose how far I need to drag it. Now, once I've finished extruding, the sketch which I used is hidden automatically. That's because most of the time when you've done an extrusion, you don't need to see that sketch anymore. I guess the thing was I had other things I probably want to extrude in that sketch, so I can reopen that sketch. If I could go over here to Sketches in the browser, click on the eye icon there, and you can turn them back on again. So then I can grab some of these other things that I created, and I can extrude them up as well. Once I've finished extruding things, I can just turn that sketch off again, click the eye next to the sketch to turn it back off. So once I've created some 3D shapes, I've got the option to modify these shapes. So talk about some of these modify tools in the next video. Or we can continue to create sketches and keep building on what we've already created. So we could create something like a circle on here. I'll finish my sketch. And then I can extrude that circle outwards. Or if I drag it the other way, it will automatically change to cut. I can cut a hole through that surface. So you can build onto your models progressively as using the sketch tool and the extrude tool. So as I said, you can draw on any flat surface in your model. So when I click on sketch, it will pop up with the original planes, which I had when I first started this project. Or I can choose any flat surface I've created since. I can't choose any curved surface, just anything flat. So I'm going to use that offset tool to offset this shape inwards. Finish that sketch. drag it up. So have a bit of a play around with the extrude tool by creating a sketch and using the extrude tool to extrude that object.